The golden light of a setting sun cast long, dramatic shadows across the manicured lawns, illuminating a scene of such stark contrast it felt torn from a fever dream. All eyes, 100 pairs belonging to the city's elite, were fixed on a single point of impossible brilliance. There, standing with the unshakable poise of a queen, was Ava Thorne, her tailored power suit a slash of dark confidence against the pastel floral arrangements. In her hands, held aloft like a sacred offering, was a wedding gown that seemed to have captured the stars themselves. It shimmered with the light of 1,000 hand-sewn diamonds, a celestial river of silk and fire. Opposite her, looking small and utterly broken, stood Lily Hayes. She was meant to be the bride, the radiant center of this perfect day, but she was a ghost at her own wedding, lost inside a simple, ill-fitting pink bridesmaid dress that clung to her in all the wrong places. Her face was a mask of disbelief, her eyes wide with a pain that was almost too raw to witness. Nearby, a gasp escaped the lips of an older woman, her face a canvas of pure horror, her perfectly coiffed hair doing little to conceal the panic in her eyes. The thrumming echo of the helicopter that had delivered Ava with such breathtaking precision just moments before finally faded, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. Who was this woman who had descended from the sky? Why had she brought a king's ransom in diamonds to a wedding she wasn't invited to? And how, in the name of all that was holy, had Lily Hayes, a gentle second-grade teacher, come to stand so diminished, so publicly shamed, yet at the very precipice of such a grand and terrible intervention? But to truly understand this bewildering spectacle, to grasp the intricate threads of love, cruelty, and buried history that had woven this moment into being, we must rewind 3 weeks. 3 weeks earlier, the world was a much simpler, quieter place for Lily Hayes. Her life was measured not in carats or stock portfolios, but in the scraped knees she bandaged, the triumphant smiles of children learning to read, and the steady, comforting rhythm of a life built on integrity. Raised by a single mother who scrubbed the floors of other people's mansions to keep a roof over their heads, Lily had learned a profound lesson early on. Dignity was not something you could buy. It was something you carried inside you, an invisible crown that no one could ever take away. Her love for Ethan Sterling felt like the culmination of that belief. He was handsome, charming, the heir to a real estate and tech empire that spanned the country. But when he looked at her, she believed he saw past the modest apartment and the second-hand car. He saw her. "My family is a lot," he had admitted one evening, his hand covering hers across the small table of their favorite diner. "They live in a different world, Lily. But you are my world. Our love is the only thing that matters. It's the bridge." Lily had clung to those words, repeating them to herself like a mantra as she navigated the treacherous waters of the Sterling family. The bridge, however, felt less like a sturdy, elegant structure and more like a flimsy rope swaying over a canyon of disdain. The condescension was never overt, never something she could point to and say, "That was cruel." It was in the way Ethan's mother, Eleanor, would compliment her dress with a tone that suggested she was surprised Lily could afford it. It was in the way his father, Richard, would steer conversations towards financial markets and global investments, subjects he knew were entirely alien to her, leaving her in a silent, smiling exile. But the true architect of her discomfort was Ethan's older sister, Victoria. Victoria Sterling moved through the world with the icy assurance of someone who had never been told no. Her resentment towards Lily was a simmering, venomous thing, hidden beneath a veneer of polished civility. 2 weeks before the wedding, at an engagement dinner held at the Sterling's palatial estate, Lily felt the full force of Victoria's quiet warfare. She had worn a simple, elegant navy blue dress, one she had saved for months to buy. Victoria, draped in a designer gown that cost more than Lily's annual salary, drifted over to her, a champagne flute held delicately in her manicured hand. "That's a lovely color on you, Lily," Victoria purred, her eyes doing a slow, deliberate scan of the fabric. "It's so brave of you to stick to what you know, to not try and be something you're not. My brother has always had a soft spot for charity cases." The words were delivered with a dazzling smile, a whisper meant only for Lily, yet they landed with the force of a physical blow. Lily's cheeks burned, but she held Victoria's gaze, her mother's voice echoing in her memory. "Dignity, Lily, it's all you truly own." She gave a small, serene smile. "Thank you, Victoria. My mother taught me that true style has nothing to do with price tags and everything to do with knowing who you are." Victoria's smile tightened, the mask slipping for a fraction of a second to reveal the raw contempt beneath. Later that night, Lily had recounted the incident to Ethan. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Oh, Lily, you know how she is. Vicky's just protective of me. She doesn't mean anything by it. Just ignore her." The dismissal hurt more than the insult itself. He wasn't her protector. He was an ambassador from another world, asking her to simply accept its cruel and unspoken rules. She was beginning to realize that the bridge he had promised was one she was expected to build, cross, and maintain all on her own. If you believe that a person's heart is their real fortune, and that quiet dignity shines brighter than any diamond, hit that like button to show Lily she's not alone in this fight. She felt profoundly alone in that moment, their quiet understanding dawning that the man she loved might not have the strength to stand with her, but only to stand near her, so long as it didn't cause a scene. The final week leading up to the wedding was a blur of passive-aggressive comments and thinly veiled insults. Every choice Lily made, from the simple white roses to the string quartet, was met with Victoria's saccharine suggestions for something more appropriate or more fitting for a sterling wedding. Lily's one act of defiance, her one non-negotiable anchor to her own identity, was her wedding dress. It wasn't a designer creation. It was a modest, elegant A-line gown she'd found in a small boutique, with delicate lace sleeves and a quiet grace that felt like an extension of her own soul. It was the one thing that was purely hers, a symbol of the woman she was, not the woman they wanted her to be. When she showed it to Ethan, he'd smiled and said, "It's perfect, Lily, it's you." For a moment, the bridge felt real again. Now, on the eve of her wedding, the Sterling family's rented mansion felt less like a celebration and more like a gilded prison. The air was thick with the scent of lilies, an ironic, cloying perfume, and the low hum of servants preparing for the next day's grand affair. Ethan was locked away in a meeting with his father, and Lily was left to wander the cavernous halls alone, a ghost in her own fairy tale. A knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. She needed to see it. She needed to touch the soft fabric of her dress to reassure herself that a piece of her still existed in this overwhelming world of theirs. She slipped into the sprawling bridal suite, her footsteps silenced by the plush carpet. The room was the size of her entire apartment, with a four-poster bed and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling gardens. She walked over to the antique armoire where her dress had been carefully hung that afternoon. Her heart hammered against her ribs with a strange mix of excitement and dread. She reached for the ornate brass handles, took a deep breath and pulled the doors open, and stared into a void. The armoire was empty, the silk garment bag, the dress, the simple, beautiful promise of tomorrow. It was all gone. A cold panic, sharp and suffocating, seized her. Her breath hitched. "No," she whispered, her hands frantically searching the empty space, as if the dress might have simply turned invisible. "No, no, no." Her voice rose with each repetition, a frantic, desperate plea to an empty room. A soft, deliberate cough came from the doorway. Lily spun around, her eyes wild with fear. Victoria stood there, leaning against the doorframe, a picture of feigned sympathy. She was dressed in silk pajamas, a smug, satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth, though her voice was laced with honeyed concern. "Lily, darling, is everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." In that moment, seeing the triumphant glint in her future sister-in-law's eyes, Lily knew. This was no mistake. This was an execution, and her wedding hadn't even begun. The morning of Lily's wedding dawned with a calm so deep it felt predatory. Sunlight, pale and thin, streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the guest suite in the Sterling mansion, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny indifferent stars. The scent of white roses and lilies, arranged in colossal bouquets, was cloying, almost funereal. Lily Hayes stood before the ornate, full-length mirror, her heart a frantic bird trapped in her ribs. She was ready. Her hair was swept into a soft, elegant twist. Her makeup was a subtle blush of hope on her cheeks. All that was left was the dress. But the heavy, protective garment bag, which had held her simple, graceful gown just last night, now hung limp and empty on the back of the door. A cold, sharp panic seized her. "No," she whispered, the sound swallowed by the cavernous room. Her hands, trembling slightly, flew to the bag, fumbling with the zipper again, as if a second check might magically restore its contents. It was empty, utterly, impossibly empty. She spun around, her eyes darting across the suite. She checked the vast walk-in closet, her hands pushing through a row of Victoria's designer outfits that smelled of expensive, sharp perfume. Nothing. She looked under the king-sized bed, behind the heavy damask curtains. The dress, the one she had saved for, the one her mother had cried seeing her in, was gone. "Hello?" Her voice was thin, barely a whisper. "Is anyone there?" The silence that answered was heavy, mocking. She called her mother's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She was likely already seated in the garden, waiting. She tried Ethan. The call rang once, twice, 3 times, before clicking to voicemail. A knot of ice formed in her stomach. He was supposed to be her partner, her protector. Where was he? Just as a sob threatened to escape her throat, the door creaked open. Victoria Sterling glided in, a vision in a silk robe, a champagne flute held delicately in her hand. A practiced look of concern was painted on her perfectly made-up face. "Lily, darling, are you not ready? Everything is about to begin." "My dress," Lily managed, her voice cracking. "Victoria, it's gone. I can't find it anywhere." Victoria's eyebrows arched in feigned surprise. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her champagne. "Gone? How could it be gone? Are you sure you didn't misplace it?" The question was a velvet-gloved slap, as if Lily could misplace something so vital in a single room. "Perhaps one of the staff moved it for steaming," Victoria mused, though her eyes held a glint of malicious triumph that made Lily's skin crawl. "Don't you worry. We'll find something for you to wear." The utter condescension in her tone, the barely concealed delight, confirmed everything Lily had feared. This wasn't an accident. This was a calculated act of cruelty, a final public reminder of her place. While Victoria made a show of looking in the same spots Lily had already frantically searched, Lily's phone finally buzzed. It was Ethan. "Lily, what's going on?" "My mother said you're holding everything up," he said, his voice tight with irritation, not concern. "Ethan, my dress is missing," she choked out, a desperate plea for him to understand, to fix this. "Victoria is here, but I think she took it. I don't know what to do." There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line, a sound of profound exasperation that broke Lily's heart more than the missing dress ever could. "Lily, for God's sake, my sister wouldn't do that. She probably just moved it by mistake. Listen, we have 200 guests waiting. Just grab anything. It's not worth making a scene." His voice was cold, distant. "Wear one of the bridesmaid dresses. Just get down here." The line went dead. "Just grab anything." The words echoed in the silent room, a final, brutal confirmation of her insignificance. She wasn't his partner. She was a problem to be managed, an inconvenience threatening the seamless production of a sterling event. A single tear escaped, hot and stinging, as she looked at Victoria, who was now holding up a gaudy, ill-fitting bridesmaid dress from the closet. The fabric was a cheap, shiny satin in a sickly shade of blush pink. "Here," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "This will have to do. It's a bit vibrant, isn't it? But at least you'll be wearing something." Forced into the dress, the fabric clinging awkwardly to her frame, Lily stared at her reflection. She saw not a bride, but a caricature, a clown in a rich family's circus. The woman in the mirror was small, diminished, a pale imitation of the joyful person she was supposed to be. The cheap fabric felt rough against her skin, a physical manifestation of her humiliation. It reminded her of something, a feeling from long ago, the scratchy wool of a hand-me-down coat she wore in 2nd grade. And with that memory, another surfaced clear and sharp, a memory of a girl with fiery eyes and a fierce protective scowl. A girl named Ava, Ava, who had stood between Lily and a group of bullies on the cracked asphalt of their school playground, her small body a defiant shield. "Leave her alone," young Ava had snarled, her loyalty an unshakable force. "Her coat is warmer than your empty heads." They had been inseparable, two girls from forgotten neighborhoods who promised to always have each other's backs, a promise that felt like a lifetime ago. Across town, in a steel and glass office overlooking the city, Ava Thorne, now a formidable billionaire, ended a call regarding a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. Her focus was absolute, her demeanor serene and controlled. As her assistant placed a cup of black coffee on her desk, her personal phone, a device reserved for a select few, buzzed with an encrypted message. Her brow furrowed as she read it. It was from a private investigator she kept on a quiet retainer to check in on a few people from her past. The message was short, brutal. "Lily Hayes, Sterling wedding. Today, Victoria is behind it. They're destroying her." A flicker of something ancient and fierce crossed Ava's face. The serene mask of the CEO vanished, replaced by the steely resolve of the girl on the playground. The deep-seated loyalty she felt for Lily, a bond forged in childhood poverty and shared dreams, ignited like a pilot light hitting gas. She stood up, her movements precise and immediate. "Cancel my afternoon," she said to her startled assistant, her voice a low, dangerous hum. "Get the helicopter ready, now, and bring me the package from the vault, the one from Paris." Back at the mansion, the gentle strains of a string quartet began to drift in from the garden. It was time. There was no escape. With every fiber of her being screaming in protest, Lily took a deep, shuddering breath. She would not give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. Clinging to a sliver of dignity that was entirely her own, she began the long, agonizing walk down the aisle. The whispers started immediately, a wave of sound that followed her down the pristine white runner. The barely suppressed snickers, the condescending glances from the impeccably dressed guests were a barrage of tiny knives. Her eyes, filled with unshed tears, met Ethan's at the far end of the aisle. He looked away, his face a mask of discomfort and acute embarrassment, confirming her deepest fear. He was ashamed of her. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of isolation, a loneliness so complete it was a physical weight. Just as she reached the altar, her heart heavy and broken, a faint, distant hum began to register, a rhythmic thumping that cut through the music and the murmurs. It grew steadily louder, a sound that did not belong in this perfect, manicured world, a sound that promised disruption. Every step Lily Hayes took down the long, manicured aisle was an act of surrender. The grass, a perfect emerald green, felt miles long, an impossible distance to cross under the weight of so many eyes. The ill-fitting pink bridesmaid dress she wore was a constant, abrasive reminder of her humiliation. Its cheap synthetic fabric clung in all the wrong places, the garish color a stark, clownish contrast to the elegant pastels and creams of the wedding party. It was a costume of shame, and Lily was its unwilling star. She could hear the whispers, faint but sharp, like the rustle of snakes in dry leaves. They followed her, a wave of condescending pity and thinly veiled amusement. She kept her gaze fixed on the floral arch at the end of the aisle, a beautiful beacon of a promise that now felt like a lie. Her eyes searched for Ethan, pleading for a look of support, a single glance that said, "I see you, I love you, this doesn't matter." But when their gazes finally met, his slid away almost instantly. He looked uncomfortable, his face a mask of pained embarrassment, his posture rigid beside his groomsman. He wasn't looking at his bride. He was looking at a problem, a social inconvenience that was marring his perfect day. In that moment, a cold, hard truth settled in Lily's heart, heavier than any sorrow she had ever known. She was not marrying a partner. She was marrying a man who would always choose the comfort of his family's approval over the dignity of her own heart. She was alone, utterly and completely alone, in a sea of strangers who saw her as nothing more than an unpolished stone trying to find a place among diamonds. The officiant offered a practiced, gentle smile as Lily finally reached the altar, but the warmth didn't reach his eyes. He too saw the spectacle. The silence that fell over the garden was heavy, expectant. It was then that a new sound intruded, a low, rhythmic thumping from far away. At first it was easy to dismiss, perhaps a distant piece of machinery or traffic from a faraway highway. But the sound grew steadily, insistently. It was a rhythmic, powerful beat that seemed to vibrate in the very air, growing from a hum to a distinct thump, thump, thump that cut through the hushed murmurs of the crowd. Heads began to turn, first in annoyance, then in curiosity. Ethan shot an irritated glance toward the sky, his brow furrowed. His father, a man whose face was a permanent sculpture of stern disapproval, looked visibly angered by the interruption. This was not part of the meticulously planned event. The thumping grew into a roar, a formidable, all-encompassing sound that drowned out the soft string music and the chirping of birds. And then they saw it. A sleek, black helicopter, its form cutting a sharp silhouette against the soft orange and pink hues of the setting sun, was descending with breathtaking precision onto the expansive lawn adjacent to the ceremony. It moved not with the clumsiness of an unexpected arrival, but with the calculated grace of a planned maneuver, its blades whipping the air into a frenzy, sending a ripple through the guests' perfectly coiffed hair and the delicate floral arrangements. Every conversation ceased. Every eye was now fixed on the machine as it settled gently onto the grass, its engines winding down with a powerful whine. The guests, a collection of the city's wealthiest and most influential, stared in stunned silence. This was a display of power that dwarfed their own, an arrival so audacious it bordered on the surreal. The door of the helicopter slid open with a quiet hiss, and for a moment, nothing happened. The anticipation was a palpable thing, thick and electric. Then a figure emerged. It was a woman, and she moved with an aura of serene authority that commanded instant respect. She was dressed not in a guest's formal attire, but in a custom-tailored power suit of the deepest charcoal grey, its lines sharp and impossibly elegant. Her posture was regal, her steps measured and deliberate as she descended from the aircraft. The setting sun caught the glint of a simple, priceless watch on her wrist, but it was her gaze that held the true power. It was sharp, intelligent, and swept over the bewildered assembly with an air of detached assessment. Her eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on the wedding party at the altar. They passed over Ethan's stunned face, over his parents' horrified expressions, and then they stopped, locking onto Victoria Sterling. A flicker of recognition, followed by a wave of pure, undiluted dread, washed over Victoria's face. Her smug confidence, the very foundation of her being, evaporated in an instant, replaced by the terrified look of someone who had just seen a ghost from a past she had tried desperately to bury. Victoria's hand flew to her throat, her knuckles white. She took a small, involuntary step back, a gesture of retreat that did not go unnoticed. The woman's gaze lingered on Victoria for a moment longer, a silent, damning judgment, before moving on. Finally, her eyes found Lily. And in that instant, the entire atmosphere shifted. The cold, assessing power in the woman's expression softened, replaced by something fierce, loyal, and tinged with a profound sadness. She saw Lily, truly saw her, standing small and vulnerable in the ridiculous pink dress, her spirit on the verge of breaking. In the woman's eyes, Lily saw not pity, but an unshakable resolve, a promise of reinforcement. With purposeful strides that spoke of a life lived without hesitation, the woman began to walk toward the altar. The crowd parted for her instinctively, a sea of silk and jewels giving way to her undeniable presence. She was Ava Thorne, a name whispered in boardrooms and on stock market floors, a self-made billionaire whose story was the stuff of modern legend. But to Lily, in that frozen moment of time, she was just Ava, the fiercely protective girl from her childhood, the friend she thought she had lost forever to a world of impossible success. Ava stopped directly in front of the Sterling family, her presence casting a long shadow over them. She ignored Ethan completely, her focus a laser beam of intention. Then she turned to Lily, her voice resonating with a clarity and strength that cut through the stunned silence, reaching every corner of the garden. "Lily," Ava said, her voice rich with an emotion that was both gentle and unbreakable. "I heard what happened. She paused, letting the weight of her arrival, of her very existence in this place, settle in. "And I brought you a little something." As if on cue, a member of her entourage, who had followed silently behind her, stepped forward. He was holding a large, pristine white garment bag. He held it aloft as Ava reached for the zipper. The metallic sound echoed in the dead quiet, a sharp, decisive sound that promised a revelation. The tension was absolute. Every guest leaned forward, their breath held in their chests. Ava's hand paused on the zipper, her eyes meeting Lily's one last time, a silent question and a powerful reassurance passing between them before her fingers pulled the tab down, ready to unveil the truth hidden inside. The world held its breath. The gentle breeze that had been rustling through the rose bushes died down, as if even nature was straining to listen. The distant thrum of the helicopter had faded into an expectant silence, a vacuum waiting to be filled. Ava Thorne's hand, steady and deliberate, grasped the zipper of the garment bag. The sound it made as she pulled it down was unnaturally loud, a sharp, metallic rip through the hushed tension of the garden. With a dramatic flourish that was both elegant and theatrical, Ava Thorne parted the black canvas. What she revealed was not merely a dress, it was a cascade of captured starlight. The gasp that swept through the crowd was a single, unified sound of disbelief. Lily Hayes, standing small and forgotten in her garish pink bridesmaid dress, felt her own breath catch in her throat. The gown was a masterpiece, a creation of impossible beauty. It was crafted from a silk so pure, it seemed to flow like liquid moonlight, its surface shimmering with an intricate constellation of hand-sewn diamonds. Each tiny, perfectly cut stone caught the fading afternoon sun, fracturing the light into 1,000 brilliant rainbows that danced across the lawn. It was a defiant beacon of light against the backdrop of her own profound humiliation. Lily stared, her mind struggling to connect this object of breathtaking value with herself. Beside her, Ethan's mother, Eleanor Sterling, let out a small, strangled cry, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her chest as if to physically hold her composure in place. But it was Victoria Sterling whose reaction was the most telling. The smug, triumphant mask she had worn all day didn't just crack, it shattered. Her face, moments before a picture of condescending victory, froze into a grotesque tableau of pure, unadulterated dread. The blood drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin a waxy, pale yellow. This was not part of her plan. This was an unforeseen, cataclysmic event. Ava Thorne let the spectacle sink in, her eyes sweeping over the stunned faces before her. Then her gaze, sharp as cut glass, settled on the Sterling family. Her voice, when she spoke again, was no longer just strong. It was laced with an icy precision that cut through the warm air, leaving a chill in its wake. "It seems," Ava began, her words resonating with a cold, clear authority, "that some people here have forgotten where they came from." Her eyes locked onto Victoria, who visibly flinched. Or perhaps they've simply tried to erase it, burying it under layers of charity galas and carefully worded press releases. She took a step closer to the altar, her presence commanding the absolute attention of every guest. You see, a fortune like the Sterlings doesn't just appear, it's built. And the foundation of this particular fortune is made of things they'd rather you not see. It's made of the broken promises given to vulnerable immigrants, of the back-breaking labor of men and women who were paid a fraction of what they were worth, of small family properties acquired through predatory practices until entire neighborhoods were hollowed out to make way for gleaming, sterile towers. A wave of murmurs rippled through the assembled elite. These were not the stories told in the society pages. Ava's gaze softened for a fraction of a second as it found Lily's, but then it hardened again as she turned back to the family. It was a system of exploitation, perfected over decades, and one of the countless people caught in that cruel web was a diligent, honest woman who spent her nights cleaning offices for meager pay, scrubbing floors in the very buildings that were making families like yours richer every single day. A woman who worked her fingers to the bone so her daughter could have a chance at a life of dignity. That woman, Ava's voice dropped, becoming a focused, damning whisper, was Lily's mother. The collective gasp this time was sharper, more personal. The abstract accusation had just been given a face. Lily felt the air leave her lungs, a dizzying wave of understanding washing over her. The casual cruelties, the subtle dismissals, the constant feeling of being judged and found wanting, it all snapped into horrifying focus. It wasn't just about her. It was about where she came from. It was about who her mother was. Ethan looked at Lily, then at his parents, his face pale and slack with shock. He opened his mouth to speak, to offer some feeble defense, but Ava Thorne gave him no quarter. "And how do I know this?" Ava continued, her voice rising again, each word a hammer blow against the Sterling's carefully constructed facade of respectability. "How do I know about the cracked sidewalks and the leaking roofs and the quiet desperation in those forgotten neighborhoods? Because I was there. I grew up on those same streets. I played in those same underfunded parks. I watched families like Lily's struggle while men like your father counted their profits." She turned her body slightly, a gesture that now fully and publicly aligned her with the bride in the ill-fitting pink dress. "Lily Hayes and I, we grew up together." That was it, the final devastating revelation. The masks fell from the faces of the Sterling family, replaced by expressions of raw, exposed guilt. Their empire of influence, built on a foundation of buried truths, was crumbling before the very society they had worked so tirelessly to impress. In that electrifying moment, with the truth laid bare for all to see, and the diamond dress shimmering beside her like a suit of armor she never knew she had, something inside Lily Hayes shifted. The years of quiet resignation, of accepting less, so of believing that she had to shrink herself to fit into other people's worlds, it all burned away. The pain and humiliation that had coiled in her stomach for hours transformed into an unshakable, white-hot resolve. She straightened her spine, a subtle movement that made her seem inches taller. She lifted her chin. The timid schoolteacher was gone, replaced by a woman who finally, fully understood her own worth. Her voice, when it emerged, was not the timid, apologetic whisper Ethan was used to. It was strong, clear, and resonant, carrying a newfound authority that stunned everyone, most of all herself. She looked directly at Ethan, her eyes no longer filled with unshed tears, but with a profound and piercing disappointment. "I came here today," Lily declared, her words cutting through the silence like a sharp blade. "Hoping for a partnership. I believed in a love that was built on mutual respect and support." Her gaze then swept over his cowering family, a family that now refused to meet her eyes. "But I realize now, I wasn't seeking to join a family. I was seeking to marry into a world that despises everything I stand for. A world built on the very exploitation my mother taught me to fight against." She took a steadying breath, her resolve hardening into granite. "I cannot marry you, Ethan." The words hung in the air, absolute and irrevocable. With a graceful yet firm movement, she reached up and unpinned the small white rose from her hair, the one token of her bridal fantasy that remained. She held it for a moment, then gently dropped it onto the pristine white cloth of the altar. It landed with a soft, final thud. "I cannot join a family whose wealth is stained with the dignity of others," she stated, her voice unwavering, "and whose hearts are devoid of empathy." With that, she turned, but she was not fleeing in shame or heartbreak. She was walking away with a strength and serenity that was more powerful than any wedding vow. She walked past the row where the Sterling family sat, their faces a ruin of public disgrace. She walked past the rows of stunned guests, their judgment now turned to a sort of awestruck wonder. She walked down the long aisle not as a jilted bride, but as a woman completely and utterly liberated. It was a walk not of defeat, but of profound victory, a public declaration of her true value that transcended any social standing or inherited fortune, leaving every single person in that perfectly manicured garden utterly and completely speechless. The months that followed the wedding that wasn't were not silent. They were a cacophony of falling empires and rising hopes. While the Sterling name became a synonym for scandal, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties and dissected in brutal opinion pieces, Lily Hayes retreated. She did not bask in the schadenfreude of their public implosion. She turned inward, seeking the quiet strength her mother had always taught her was the only true currency. The diamond dress, a breathtaking symbol of her public vindication, lay carefully preserved in its garment bag in Ava Thorne's secure guest suite. For a week, Lily didn't even look at it. It felt like a relic from another life, a beautiful but heavy ghost. It was Ava who finally broke the silence, finding Lily on a balcony overlooking the city, the afternoon light softening the hard edges of the skyline. "You know," Ava said, her voice gentle, "that dress is more than just silk and stones, it's a key." Lily looked at her oldest friend, the girl from the cracked sidewalks who now commanded boardrooms, and saw the same fierce loyalty in her eyes. "A key to what?" "To whatever you want to build next," Ava replied simply. "Its value isn't in being worn, it's in being used." That single conversation ignited a fire within Lily. The heartbreak, the humiliation, the profound sense of betrayal. They were not endpoints, but fuel. The dress wasn't a memento of a battle won. It was the seed capital for a future she would write herself. With Ava's guidance, the gown was consigned to a private, highly exclusive auction house. Its story, the tale of a teacher's dignity and a billionaire's loyalty, adding an intangible, priceless value to its already staggering worth. It sold for a sum that made headlines, every shimmering diamond, every hand-sewn stitch, converted into a tangible promise for hundreds of children who had never known such opulence. While the funds were being transferred, the sterling empire crumbled. Ava's public accusations had been the first decisive blow, but the media frenzy that followed unearthed a generation of predatory business practices. Lawsuits, both old and new, emerged from the woodwork. Their philanthropic endeavors were exposed as hollow PR stunts, tax shelters designed to whitewash a fortune built on exploitation. Invitations to galas mysteriously dried up. The phone in their sprawling mansion, once a constant source of power brokering, fell into a chilling silence. Victoria, stripped of her social armor, became a recluse. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling watched their life's work, their legacy, turn to ash, the respect they had so aggressively curated evaporating overnight. One dreary afternoon, 3 months after the disastrous wedding day, Ethan appeared at the temporary office Lily and Ava had set up. He looked smaller, diminished, the tailored suit hanging on him like a costume he no longer knew how to wear. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed desperation. "Lily," he began, his voice raspy. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I was weak. I let my family dictate everything. But I love you. I always have." Lily looked at him, not with anger or pity, but with a profound and serene distance. She saw a man trapped in the wreckage of his own choices, a man who had stood by and watched her be humiliated because it was easier than standing up. "The mistake wasn't just on our wedding day, Ethan," she said, her voice calm and steady, a sound that held the weight of her newfound certainty. "The mistake was you believing that love could coexist with contempt. You can't love someone you're fundamentally ashamed of." "I can change," he pleaded, taking a step forward. "We can start over, away from them." Lily held up a hand, not to push him away, but to mark a final uncrossable boundary. "There is no we anymore. I'm not the same person you left standing at that altar. That woman was hoping to be accepted into your world. This woman," she said, gesturing to the architectural plans for the new community center spread across her desk, "is busy building her own." She looked at him one last time, the ghost of what they might have been finally fading. "I hope you find your way, Ethan, I truly do." He left without another word, the sound of the closing door a quiet, definitive end to a chapter of her life. With the proceeds from the dress and a matching monumental contribution from Ava Thorne, Lily's vision took shape. In the heart of the low-income community where she and Ava had grown up, a dilapidated warehouse was transformed. It became the Hayes Thorne Educational Center, a beacon of light and possibility. It was not just a place for tutoring, it was a sanctuary. It had a library filled with new books, a computer lab with the latest technology, an art studio that smelled of clay and fresh paint, and quiet rooms where children could simply do their homework in peace. Lily poured every ounce of her being into it. She knew these kids because she had been one of them. She knew the pull of a life limited by circumstance, and she was determined to give them a ladder. She hired teachers who cared, mentors from the community, and volunteers who believed in the transformative power of a single opportunity. The center flourished. The sound of children's laughter echoed where there had once been the rumble of machinery. The quiet hum of concentrated study replaced the silence of neglect. It became a place where a child's worth was measured not by their zip code, but by the size of their dreams. One sun-drenched afternoon, nearly a year after she had walked away from the altar, Lily stood in the middle of the center's bustling main hall. A little girl with bright, curious eyes tugged on her sleeve, holding up a book. "Miss Hayes," she asked, "can you help me with this word?" Lily knelt down, her heart swelling with a kind of joy she had never known, a fulfillment so deep and real it dwarfed any memory of pain. She saw her younger self in that girl's hopeful face. She saw Ava. She saw a future being forged, not of wealth or status, but of kindness and resilience. The Sterling scandal was old news, their name a faded footnote. Ethan was a distant memory. The ill-fitting pink dress and the magnificent diamond gown were two sides of the same coin, catalysts that had led her to this exact moment. Looking at the vibrant, thriving community she had built, surrounded by the tangible proof of her purpose, Lily Hayes understood the profound truth of her journey. True value was never something that could be given or taken away. It wasn't inherited from a powerful family or bestowed by a diamond dress. It was forged in the quiet moments of integrity, built through unwavering compassion, and polished by the fires of adversity. On that day, she had been forced to choose what to wear, and in the end, she had chosen the one thing that had always truly belonged to her, the one thing that could never be tarnished or sold, a dignity that shone brighter and far longer than any diamond.